Figma is one of the most popular design tools used today. It's free, it runs in your browser or on your desktop, and it's lightning fast. It also features collaboration tools, empowering teams to create and work together. The question isn't, what can I do in Figma, but rather, what can't I do in Figma? Hello, and welcome to Show Me UX. I'm Bill, a user experience designer, and in this video, I'll go over the basics of Figma and how to use it to get started on your first project. First, navigate to figma.com in your web browser, and look for the Sign Up button in the top right. Here, you can log in with your Google credentials or create a username and password and sign up that way. Once you've signed up, you can begin designing in the web browser, or if you prefer, you can download the desktop app by clicking on the account icon in the top right and clicking Get Desktop App. I prefer to design in the desktop app. However, if you prefer to design in the web browser, it should look the same as what you see here. To start a new design file, click New Design File in the top left. This is what a blank design file looks like in Figma. Let's take a look at what we have to work with. On the left side is the Layers and Assets panel. The middle portion is the canvas, which is where your design will appear. On the right side is the Design, Prototype, and Inspect panel. In the top left, the Figma icon acts as the menu button, and clicking it will reveal a list of actions. To the right of the menu is the Tool panel, which includes the elements you will use to create your project. Lastly, at the middle top of the Figma interface, you will find the options, which allow you to access contextual commands for each tool, as well as rename your project. Keep in mind that while you design, there's no need to save your project, as Figma saves it automatically to the cloud. Now that we have a basic understanding of Figma's interface, let's take a closer look at the tools we have available. We'll start by considering the shapes, which are accessed by clicking the down arrow to the right of the rectangle icon in the Tool panel. Here we see rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and an option to place an image we have saved onto the canvas. With the rectangle tool selected, you can click and drag inside the canvas to draw a rectangle of any size. Alternatively, you can click inside the canvas without dragging, which will add a rectangle with the default height and width, as well as a default fill color. In the Design panel on the right, we can see the properties of the rectangle we have drawn. These properties include the position, the height and width of the rectangle, as well as other parameters. You'll notice that when I placed the rectangle onto the canvas, it appeared as an item in the Layers panel on the left. Layers are any element present on the canvas and are given a default name based on what type of element it is. You can rename layers by double-clicking on them or by right-clicking and selecting Rename. I'll go ahead and rename this one Square. Layers are a form of hierarchy. To demonstrate this, I'll add another rectangle to the canvas. And I will change its fill. I can do this by clicking on the color swatch in the fill area located on the right side. That's the Design panel. And I'll go with this red color. I will click and drag so that it looks like it's on top of the original rectangle we drew, which is called Square. As we see here in the Layers panel, the new rectangle I just drew, called Rectangle 1, is on top of the layer called Square. That is why it appears to be on top of it in the canvas here. If I wanted to change the order, I could click and drag Rectangle 1 where it's below Square, and we can see the change take place in the canvas. Let's consider some of the options we have available for changing the appearance of the Square layer. With the layer selected, if we look at the Design panel on the right, we see that we have a variety of options for affecting the appearance of this layer. For example, we can change the X and Y coordinates, as well as the width and the height. We also have access to the rotation, as well as the corner radius. If we wanted to change any of these values, we could click in the input field, which would highlight the current figure, and we could type a new one in. For example, let's give the Square layer a width of 200 pixels. By typing that in and pressing enter, we can see that the layer has responded appropriately. Additionally, if we hover over the W for width with our mouse, we can see that we have a horizontal double-headed arrow. If we click and drag, we also see that we can change the value this way. This technique is called scrubbing. If we wanted to change the rotation, we could also scrub this value, or we could click here in the rotation field and type in our desired angle. For example, 45. We can also change the corner radius of the shape. If we click the field, we can say, give it a corner radius of 20, which will affect all 4 corners of the shape. I will deselect the layer so it's more obvious. And as you can see, all 4 corners of this rectangle have a radius of 20 pixels. I'll go ahead and reselect the layer. If, for example, you wanted to change just one of the corners, we could click the icon here, Independent Corners, which brings up 4 fields, one for each of the corners. When you have the figure in one of the fields selected, the icon to the left indicates which corner you are changing the value of. For example, 20 refers to the top left corner radius, the second, the top right, third, bottom right, and fourth, bottom left. If we wanted to change these, this might be what it would look like. In this way, we can create some fun shapes that will help us in our design projects. We can also change the fill value of an object by clicking the color swatch here. This brings up the color picker, which allows us to click and drag to any value that we like. We can change the hue with this slider here, and we can also change the opacity with this slider. Notice, as I drag this back and forth, the value here in percent changes. This indicates what percentage opacity we'll be working with. You'll also see a hex value here. If you have a hex value in mind, or you're given one with your project, or it's in your design system, you can of course type it in. Figma also has several color systems in place in case you don't want to use hex. These include RGB, CSS, HSL, and HSB. We can also add a stroke to the layer. We can do this by clicking stroke or by clicking plus. Both do the same thing. Let's go ahead and add a stroke to this layer. It has a default value of pure black, that is hex value 000000 with 100% visibility. The stroke is drawn on the inside, and if we click the downward arrow, we can change that to center or outside. We'll stick with inside for now. This figure refers to the thickness of the stroke, and we can change that to whatever we please. Let's say 20. You'll notice that it's a bit hard to see, however, because the fill has a hex value of 313131, but the stroke is a value of 000000. Let's change the stroke color. We'll click the swatch and make that a lighter gray. There are also several effects that come bundled with Figma. If we want to look at some of them, we can click the plus next to the word effects, or we can just click effects. When clicked, it automatically adds a drop shadow. However, this is not the only effect we have available. If we want a different effect, we click the drop-down arrow next to the current effect, for example, drop shadow, and we see that we have inner shadow, drop shadow, layer blur, and background blur. If we want to change the effect settings, we click on this sun icon to the left of whatever effect type it is. And you'll have contextual options here that will change, of course, depending on what sort of effect is selected. Drop shadow, for example, gives us an option for the X offset, the Y offset, the blur value, as well as the spread. We can also change the drop shadow color and the opacity thereof. If we want to remove the effect, we can click the minus icon here. Thus concludes this tutorial on the basics of Figma. As demonstrated, Figma is a powerful design app and will be a useful tool in creating your projects. Future videos will focus in more detail on design basics, as well as some of the more advanced features. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to Figma. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you next video.